Everything that every biology textbook ever written, every introductory science class ever taught, every foundational assumption that the entire field of biology has been built upon for over a century and a half regarding the production of oxygen on this planet has just been challenged, not by a theoretical argument, not by a computer model, not by a speculative hypothesis proposed by a maverick scientist working outside the mainstream of their field, but by a physical discovery on the floor of the Pacific Ocean, in the crushing darkness of the deep sea where no sunlight has ever penetrated and where the photosynthetic processes that have always been understood as the fundamental and essentially exclusive mechanism by which oxygen is produced biologically on Earth cannot possibly be occurring. A discovery of strange metallic growths sitting on the Pacific seabed that are producing oxygen in complete darkness through a mechanism that no scientist fully understands, that no existing biological or chemical theory adequately explains, and that has sent shockwaves through the scientific community of biologists, chemists, oceanographers, astrobiologists, and earth scientists who are now confronting the reality that the ocean floor, a place that humanity has explored less thoroughly than the surface of the moon, a place whose mysteries and whose biological richness continue to exceed the most ambitious estimates of even the most enthusiastic deep-sea researchers, has just revealed something so fundamentally unexpected, so profoundly challenging to established scientific understanding, and so potentially consequential for the future of biology, the future of our understanding of Earth's oxygen cycle, and the future of the search for life beyond this planet that the word discovery, however frequently it is deployed, and however easily it is applied to findings of far lesser significance, is in this case entirely and completely appropriate to the magnitude of what has been found on the Pacific seabed in the darkness of the deep ocean. The metallic growths themselves, the strange nodule-like formations of polymetallic material that have been known to exist on certain areas of the deep ocean floor for decades, studied primarily for their potential economic value as sources of manganese, cobalt, nickel, and other commercially valuable metals that the deep-sea mining industry has been eyeing with increasing interest, as terrestrial sources of these minerals become more constrained and more expensive to extract, were not previously thought to be biologically active in any way that would be relevant to the oxygen cycle or to the broader question of biological oxygen production, having been studied and categorized primarily as geological and mineralogical phenomena, rather than as biologically significant entities, objects of interest to geologists, mineralogists, and mining engineers, rather than to biologists, biochemists, or the researchers whose work focuses on the fundamental processes of life and the mechanisms by which living systems interact with and transform their chemical environment. The discovery that these metallic growths are producing oxygen in the complete absence of sunlight was not made through a targeted search for oxygen-producing processes in deep sea environments. It was made through the kind of careful, systematic, and methodologically rigorous scientific observation that produces unexpected discoveries. When researchers are measuring the properties of an environment with sufficient precision and sufficient comprehensiveness to detect phenomena that prior assumptions had given no reason to expect, and in this case, the detection of oxygen production in deep-sea sediment, samples from the area of the Pacific, known as the Clarion Clipperton Zone, a vast expanse of deep ocean floor in the central Pacific between Hawaii and Mexico that contains some of the densest concentrations of polymetallic nodules found anywhere in the world's oceans, and that has been the focus of intense scientific and commercial interest for decades, revealed oxygen. Concentrations in dark sediment samples that were not merely anomalous in the sense of being slightly higher than expected, but genuinely impossible to explain through any known process involving sunlight or any other previously identified mechanism of biological or chemical oxygen production that could plausibly be operating in the completely dark, high-pressure environment of the deep ocean floor. The initial response of the researchers who detected these oxygen anomalies reflects the appropriate scientific caution that genuinely extraordinary findings demand, because the history of science is littered with examples of apparent anomalies that turned out, upon closer investigation, to be the products of measurement error, sample contamination, instrumental artifact, or the misapplication of analytical methods to samples whose properties the methods were not designed to characterize, and the specific environmental conditions of deep-sea sample collection with the pressure changes, temperature changes, and physical disturbances involved in bringing samples from the deep ocean floor to the surface for analysis create specific and well-documented potential sources of contamination and artifact that responsible scientists must rigorously rule out before accepting anomalous findings as genuine rather than as products of the sampling and analysis process itself. The process of ruling out these alternative explanations, of demonstrating through multiple independent lines of evidence, through multiple independent analytical methods, and through multiple Independent research teams examining the same phenomena that the oxygen production detected in association with the polymetallic nodules of the Pacific seabed is real, is occurring in situ on the ocean floor, rather, than being introduced through contamination, and is genuinely inexplicable through any known mechanism of oxygen production that does not involve sunlight, is a process that has taken considerable time and considerable scientific effort, and that has produced a growing body of evidence of sufficient strength and sufficient methodological rigor, that the scientific community is now being required to accept that something genuinely unprecedented and genuinely scientifically significant is happening that depend on the chemical conditions of their environment in ways that the discovery of spontaneous oxygen production by the nodules suggests may be more complex and more interconnected than any previous model of deep ocean ecosystem function has accounted for. The discovery of oxygen production by the nodules raises the immediate and practically significant question of whether the biological communities living in and around the nodule fields, the bacteria, the archaea, the worms, the crustaceans, the echinoderms, and the many other organisms that make the deep Pacific seabed their home, are in some way dependent on the oxygen produced by the nodules for their survival, whether the nodule-generated oxygen constitutes a significant component of the oxygen budget that sustains biological activity in this environment, and what the removal of the nodules through industrial mining would mean for the oxygen availability and therefore the biological community of the deep ocean environments from which they are extracted. Questions whose answers could have profound implications for the regulatory framework governing deep-sea mining and for the environmental conditions that mining companies would be required to meet before permission to operate could be granted. The history of how this discovery was made, verified, published, and received by the scientific community is itself a story that illuminates how science works when it encounters genuinely revolutionary findings that challenge deeply held consensus, with initial skepticism giving way to grudging acknowledgement as the verification process eliminated alternative explanations one by one, with peer reviewers demanding and receiving increasingly rigorous evidence before accepting for publication findings whose implications they recognized as extraordinary, with the broader scientific community responding to publication with the mixture of excitement, skepticism, and urgent desire to replicate and extend the findings that characterizes healthy science confronting a genuine paradigm challenge, and with the media and public response amplifying the significance of the discovery in ways that sometimes accurately captured its revolutionary implications, and sometimes overstated or mischaracterized specific aspects of the finding, in ways that required correction and clarification from the scientists who made it. The future research program that this discovery has made necessary and urgent spans multiple scientific disciplines and multiple research approaches, laboratory studies of the electrochemical properties of nodules under controlled conditions that allow the oxygen-generating mechanism to be characterized with the precision and the completeness that a full mechanistic understanding requires, field studies of the oxygen concentrations, the chemical gradients, and the biological communities in nodule fields across different areas of the deep Pacific to understand the geographic distribution and the environmental variability of the phenomenon, theoretical work to develop the electrochemical models that can explain why nodules generate the voltages they do and predict under what conditions and at what rates oxygen generation occurs, astrobiological research that incorporates the new understanding of abiotic oxygen generation into frameworks for interpreting planetary atmospheric data and designing life detection instruments and experiments, and conservation research that uses the new understanding of nodule ecological function to inform the regulatory frameworks governing deep sea mining in ways that protect the ecosystem services that the nodules provide, as well as the biodiversity they support. The fundamental significance of what has been found on the Pacific seabed, strange metallic growths producing oxygen in complete darkness through a process that no biological textbook described and no scientific consensus anticipated, is a significance that operates simultaneously at the most immediate and most practical level of deep ocean conservation and mining regulation, and at the most profound and most abstract level of how we understand the mechanisms of life, the production of the oxygen that sustains it, and the possibilities for its existence in environments and on worlds that the discovery of nodule-generated oxygen has just made more scientifically conceivable and more worthy of serious scientific investigation than they were before a group of researchers measuring chemical gradients in Pacific seabed sediment found something that should not have been there and refused to look away from what the data was telling them until the scientific community had no choice but to confront the revolutionary implications of a discovery that has changed permanently and irrevocably what we know about oxygen, about life, about the deep ocean, and about the extraordinary capacity of our planet to surprise us with new evidence of processes and possibilities that the most careful and the most rigorous scientific thinking had not imagined and had not prepared us to find. Like this video, if this exploration of the metallic growths on the Pacific seabed that are producing oxygen without sunlight gave you the sense of genuine scientific wonder, intellectual excitement, and profound appreciation for the continuing capacity of our planet to reveal new dimensions of its extraordinary complexity that a discovery of this magnitude genuinely deserves, subscribe to this channel for the kind of serious, deeply researched, and genuinely illuminating coverage of the scientific discoveries that are reshaping our understanding of life, the planet, and the cosmos, in ways that demand serious attention and serious thought from everyone who cares about science and about the world it is revealing to us. And tell me in the comments what you think the discovery of oxygen production by metallic nodules on the Pacific seabed means for the search for life beyond Earth, and for our understanding of the true boundaries of what is possible in the living and the non-living world that we are still, after centuries of scientific inquiry, only beginning to understand. See you in the next one.